So the presentation was called Social Media and TV, an Integrated Story. And what it did was it took a study of the attitudes, usages, behaviors, different components that we had looked at around social media, Facebook, MySpace, Twitter, all sorts of cool things, and integrated that with TV viewing behavior. And what we found was the segments of social media users, from the early adopters through the late to the party folks, really mapped nicely to their TV viewing behaviors. So someone who was late to social media, kind of less tech savvy, new to Facebook, not using it to write blogs or anything else, those are the ones TV-wise that watch full commercials, that skew a bit towards prime time, that kind of mirror slower TV adoption patterns, or slower technological adoption patterns, better said. So that was kind of the kind of things we were looking at, and we had a really deep read on what programs they were watching. And it was fascinating stuff. And from a research design perspective, what we really liked about it is whenever we think on these dimensions, or for some sort of cross-media measurement, we have two key principles, or two key dimensions. One is, can we look at data wide, meaning across multiple media, not one media at a time. That's pretty basic because TV is not consumed independent of print, which is independent of anything else. So we want to look at media as it's consumed in reality, so that's wide across multiple media. But we also want to look at media deep within a media, meaning online is not just websites. It's social media, it's ad networks, it's all sorts of targeted capabilities. Print is not just magazines, it's specific titles, it's specific release dates, all sorts of things. So whenever we do one of these studies, we want to look at it, are we meeting that principle of going wide and going deep? And in this case, what we were excited about is we went really deep on the TV side because it's passively collected data. We looked at day parts, we looked at time-shifted viewing, we looked at commercial loyalty, we looked at programs and networks. And on the social media side, we were at the site level, at deep psychographics and motivations and occasions and demographics. So on a wide dimension, we're only two media, so it's better than one, but it's still wider than one. And from a deep perspective, this was a very deep study. So that kind of sums up what we were doing. This is meant to aid planning decisions, right, straightforwardly. So in this case, it was if you wanted to target different social media types, knowing who's a fanatic versus who's sort of a voyeur and steps back and just sort of watches what's going on, you would have the capability of knowing what networks and which individual programs to use to target them. So from a media buying perspective, that's great information. From an advertising or more creative perspective, we didn't report on this today, but we also have, I believe, 1 million spots in the month we looked at by segment. So 1 million television spots. So you could really see which ads are being watched, whether they're watched on a time-shifted basis or not, whether they're actually watched in their entirety or not. So for both the media folks and the advertiser folks, this gives a lot of rich information planning-wise on how to, and so it's extremely actionable. Among those folks that are on social media, it's definitely, like you said, the older folks skewing late to the party. That said, they're having a good time with it. So we had, the data really shows attitudinally that group at first was a little hesitant and certainly more reluctant to get involved. But now that they're involved, they're kind of having a good time. So what that would mean for an individual product, we'd have to look at in more depth. But just there's a general openness to the media, that's kind of the way they're looking at it. What we want to do, though, is do studies like this to answer exactly that question, which would say, okay, so what are they doing and what are they thinking online? Same people, how are they acting television viewing-wise, so that we can understand how better to target them. So it definitely answers that question. And then if I was a tech firm or if I was a fiber, like you said, what we would do is a little different. We would actually use their specific segmentation and tie that to the TV viewing behavior. We wouldn't necessarily look at a generalized one. And then we would look within their own customized targets and figure out what which targets are high value, low value, most likely respond to what messages, and then we would look at what they're watching, which programs, how long, et cetera, et cetera. So we'd really want to do that on a custom basis because most of the big advertisers will have their own targeting system. But from a general perspective, we now know if given the way different social media users behave and think and feel, what they actually watch and don't watch, which is pretty powerful. A couple different things. Well, very simply, we first want to update the study because we fielded in 3Q09. It's very quickly going to be 3Q10. And in social media, we know there's a lot of changes that happen, so we need to update and revise and resubmit because not only will it be interesting to look at the social media differences when you're out, if there are any TV differences when you're out. So that's step one. Step two then is expanding it, meaning if we need to find the right partner and the right data to link it to print consumption, to link it to radio viewing, and sort of expand out the cross-media-ness. So as right now, I think if we go back to our two first principles, we're really good at the deep. We know a lot about social media attitudes. We know as much as you could possibly know about TV viewing behavior, but it's only those two media. So we could probably expand it within online, but we could also expand it to other media and kind of build out the story that way. So that's really our primary goals.